Imagine being the new kid at school, quiet, different, and instantly marked as a target. Now, picture the bullies making their move, laughing, shoving, certain they've found their next victim. But what they don't know is that this new girl has a past, a secret that's about to turn the tables in the most brutal way. This isn't just another fight story. This is the day the bullies picked on the wrong girl. From a very first moment, she knew this school was different. The buildings were bigger, the faces were unfamiliar, and the atmosphere felt heavy, almost like a stage where everyone was watching, judging, and deciding who belonged and who didn't. The new girl, Maya, stepped into the courtyard that morning, her red hoodie pulled snugly around her shoulders. It wasn't a fancy brand. It wasn't part of the school's culture of expensive sneakers and designer jackets. But it was hers. Bright, bold, and different. She walked with her head held high, even though her stomach was twisting with nervousness. She was new in town, new to the school, and had no friends yet. But Maya had learned long ago that showing fear only invited trouble. So instead, she carried herself with calm confidence, each step steady, her eyes scanning the courtyard without hesitation. The courtyard was alive with chatter, laughter, and the clatter of footsteps. Students grouped together like puzzle pieces. Athletes with athletes, cheerleaders with cheerleaders, gamers huddled over handheld consoles, and loners sitting on the edges pretending not to care. Maya noticed how quickly people measured each other up, placing everyone into invisible boxes. She didn't fit into any of them, and that made her stand out. Whispers followed her as she walked past. Who's she? Never seen her before. Look at that hoodie. She doesn't care at all, huh? Some sneered, some giggled, and others just stared, curious but cautious. It wasn't unusual for new students to arrive, but there was something about Maya, her quietness, her steady walk, that felt different. She wasn't trying to blend in like most new kids. She wasn't rushing to make friends or hiding behind her phone. She was just there, and that alone was enough to draw attention. Maya ignored the whispers. She had heard them before in other places, other schools. She knew the pattern. First curiosity, then exclusion, and eventually, if you weren't careful, cruelty. It wasn't her first time being the new girl. But what she didn't realize yet was that this school had its own rules. Rules enforced not by teachers or principals, but by students who believed they were untouchable. It didn't take long for her to notice them. Near the center of the courtyard stood a group of students in matching green varsity jackets, the school's emblem stitched proudly on the chest. They didn't just stand there, they owned the space. Other students walked around them, like water bending around rocks in a stream. No one bumped into them, no one ignored them, and no one dared to challenge them. This wasn't just any group. These were the so-called popular kids. They walked together, laughed together, and ruled together. Their voices carried louder than the rest. Their smiles weren't always friendly, more like smirks that came at someone else's expense. And their eyes, sharp, searching, and judgmental, looked for easy targets. Maya felt their gaze land on her. One girl in the group, tall with her blonde hair pulled into a perfect ponytail, stopped mid-laugh when she saw Maya. Her friends followed her gaze, and within seconds, the entire group was staring. Their laughter shifted into murmurs. A smirk tugged at the corner of the blonde girl's lips. It was a look Maya knew too well, the look of someone who had already decided who she was without knowing her name. She kept walking, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. Her mother had always told her, walk like you know where you're going, even when you don't. People respect confidence, even when it's borrowed. So she did. She walked with borrowed confidence. Each step measured, her chin slightly raised. But her silence, her refusal to bow her head, only made her presence louder. The group whispered among themselves. The blonde girl crossed her arms, tilting her head, clearly amused. The truth was, Maya wasn't trying to be bold. She wasn't trying to challenge anyone. She was just being herself. But in a place where reputation mattered more than kindness, being yourself was sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do. The day moved forward, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. In every hallway, at every turn, she noticed the green jackets, leaning against lockers, sitting on benches, walking in tight formation. They weren't just students. They were like a shadow that followed the school's rhythm. Other kids noticed too, the way they avoided eye contact with the group, the way conversations hushed when the jackets passed by. It was clear this wasn't just popularity, it was power, and power loves to test its limits. At lunch, Maya sat alone at a table near the edge of the courtyard, unpacking the sandwich she'd made that morning. She didn't mind eating alone. She had done it plenty of times before, but she could feel the stares, subtle but present, like someone waiting for her to slip up, waiting for her to look small. She glanced up and caught sight of them again. The varsity group, laughing and tossing their heads back, whispering between bites of food. Every so often, one of them would glance in her direction. She looked away, pretending not to notice, but her instincts told her the truth. She was already on their radar. That night, when Maya got home, she thought about it. She thought about the looks, the whispers, and the stares. It would have been easier to keep her head down, to smile nervously, to let them know she was harmless. But Maya wasn't built that way. Life had taught her to be strong, to stand tall, and to never let anyone decide her worth. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a small smirk forming on her face. They thought she was just another quiet new girl. They thought her silence was weakness. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that Maya carried a past with her, a past filled with sweat, training, and discipline, a past that had taught her how to fight, not just physically, but mentally. Maya wasn't looking for a fight, but if they brought one to her, they would learn the hard way that they had picked the wrong girl. It started small. At first, Maya almost brushed it off as harmless. A whisper when she walked by, a laugh that carried just a little too loudly when she raised her hand in class, a mistaken bump in the hallway that made her drop her books. These weren't accidents. They were tests. The bullies were poking, prodding, waiting to see how the new girl would react. Maya ignored it. She'd been through worse, and she knew better than to let every insult drag her down. Life had taught her patience. Life had taught her that reacting too soon only gave bullies the satisfaction they craved. But here's the thing about bullies. When you don't get a reaction, they don't stop. They escalate. They mistake silence for weakness. And at this school, no one escalated faster than Jessica. Jessica wasn't just any girl. She was a loud one, the ringleader of the varsity jacket crew. With her blonde ponytail pulled tight and her booming voice, she thrived on attention. People followed her because they were scared of her, not because they truly liked her. She had the kind of power that came from intimidation. And the moment Maya walked in wearing that red hoodie, Jessica decided she had found her next target. She told herself it was just fun, just a joke, just keeping a new girl in check. But deep down, Jessica hated Maya's silence, hated her calmness, hated that Maya didn't look at her like she was important. It was like Maya saw right through her, and Jessica couldn't stand it. The final straw came one afternoon during lunch. Maya was crossing the schoolyard with her tray, an apple, a sandwich, and a carton of milk. She wasn't looking for trouble. She just wanted to eat in peace. The sun was warm on her face, and for a brief moment, she let herself relax. But peace doesn't last long when bullies are circling. Jessica spotted her from across the courtyard. She nudged her friends, a cruel smile spreading across her face. "Watch this," she whispered. The crew followed behind her like shadows as she made her way toward Maya. Students began to notice. Heads turned. Conversations faded. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Jessica cut across the yard, stepping right into Maya's path. She planted herself in front of her, arms crossed, chin lifted. Maya stopped walking, balancing the tray in her hands, her expression unreadable. "Hey, new girl," Jessica sneered, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Nice hoodie. Did you get that from the trash?" The words hung in the air like poison. The group behind her immediately burst into laughter, loud and exaggerated, as if the insult was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Another boy in the group leaned in with a smirk. "Maybe she can't afford real clothes. Should we start a charity for her?" The laughter grew. Students on the edges of the crowd giggled nervously. Some out of fear of Jessica, others just eager not to be the next target. Maya didn't react. She didn't flinch. She didn't roll her eyes or lower her head. She simply walked over to a nearby bench, set her tray down carefully, and then turned back. She crossed her arms slowly, deliberately, and locked eyes with Jessica. Her calmness was unnerving. Maya wasn't giving them the embarrassment they wanted. She wasn't playing along with their script. And that silence, that unshakable stillness, made the bullies even angrier. Jessica stepped closer, her smirk fading into a scowl. "I'm talking to you," she snapped, her voice rising. "What's the matter? Too scared to answer?" She shoved Maya's shoulder hard, the sudden force making a sharp sound as it connected. The crowd gasped in unison. For a split second, everything froze. Then came the murmurs. Did she just shove her? Oh, it's about to go down. Someone record this. Phones came out, glowing screens raised high. The courtyard transformed into a stage, and Maya and Jessica were the main actors in a play everyone wanted to see. Jessica thrived under the attention. This was her arena, her moment to show dominance. She turned slightly, smirking at her crew as if to say, "Watch me put her in her place." But as she turned back to Maya, something about the new girl's eyes gave her pause. Maya wasn't scared. She wasn't angry either. Her eyes were steady, sharp, almost calculating, like someone who had seen this before. Too many times before. Maya didn't move. She stood there, arms still crossed, her feet planted firmly. She didn't look like prey. She didn't look like a victim. She looked unshaken. And that unnerved Jessica more than she was willing to admit. But Jessica couldn't back down. Not now. Not with the whole school watching, cameras recording, and her reputation on the line. Backing down would mean weakness. And weakness wasn't something Jessica could afford. So she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a hiss only Maya could hear. "You don't belong here. And I'm going to make sure you know it." The crowd roared with anticipation. They weren't just watching a confrontation anymore. They were waiting for a fight. And though Maya hadn't moved a single step yet, one thing was clear. The bullies were about to learn that the quiet girl in the red hoodie wasn't as harmless as they thought. Maya took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling slowly as the courtyard buzzed around her. For days she had ignored the whispers, the laughter, the shoves in the hallways. She had told herself it wasn't worth it, that giving bullies attention was the same as giving them power. But this moment was different. Jessica's shove wasn't just about teasing anymore. It was about trying to break her. And Maya could feel the weight of dozens of eyes locked onto her, watching, recording, waiting to see if she would fold. She had been patient, but now her patience was slipping away like sand through her fingers. Her mind sharpened, her breathing slowed. All the noise around her seemed to fade until the only thing she could hear was her own heartbeat. Maya straightened her posture, lifted her chin slightly, and locked her eyes on Jessica. Then she shifted her gaze just long enough to glance at the group of varsity-jacketed bullies, smirking behind her. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "You think I'm scared of you because you have a jacket in a crowd?" She let the silence hang for a moment, her words cutting through the noise. "You have no idea who you're messing with." The courtyard reacted instantly. "Oh!" a kid in the back shouted, his voice carrying above the others. Phones tilted higher. Fingers tapped furiously on screens, capturing every second. Jessica froze for a moment, her smirk faltering just slightly. She hadn't expected Maya to talk back, certainly not like this. But she quickly recovered, plastering a fake smile across her face. Then she laughed. Loud, exaggerated, forced. The crew behind her joined in, laughing even harder, as though the only way to drown out Maya's words was with noise. "Oh, really?" Jessica sneered. "You think you're tough? You think you can just walk in here and talk to me like that?" The laughter grew louder, but something about it felt hollow. The crowd wasn't just laughing anymore. They were watching carefully. Some of them, for the first time, were beginning to wonder if Jessica had met her match. Jessica stepped forward, ready to shove Maya again, harder this time. But before her hands could land, Maya moved. Quick, smooth, precise. Her hand shot up, catching Jessica's wrist midair. With a twist, gentle, controlled, but undeniably firm, Maya redirected the shove and pushed her hand away. Jessica stumbled backward, off balance, nearly tripping over her own feet. The reaction was immediate. Gasps echoed across the courtyard. Someone shouted, "No way!" Another voice chimed in, "Did you see that?" Jessica, the untouchable queen of the schoolyard, had just been stopped cold. For a split second, Jessica's mask cracked. Shock flickered in her eyes. No one, absolutely no one, had ever stood up to her like that before. But she couldn't let that show. Not here. Not with a whole school watching. Her face hardened. She straightened up, brushed off her jacket, and glared at Maya with a mix of fury and disbelief. Before she could react, one of her backup players decided to step in. A tall boy with a broad frame, clearly used to throwing his weight around, stepped forward. He cracked his knuckles dramatically, trying to look intimidating. "Back off, new girl," he growled. But he didn't even get to finish his sentence. Maya moved before the words could leave his mouth. With a swift step to the side, she lowered her body slightly, hooked her leg behind his ankle, and gave a light sweep. The boy's balance disappeared instantly. His arms flailed, and with a heavy thud, he hit the ground in front of everyone. The entire courtyard erupted. "Yo!" She dropped him. "No way. Did you see how fast that was?" She didn't even touch him hard. The crowd was buzzing with energy, their excitement mixing with disbelief. Some laughed in shock. Others just stared, mouths wide open. But Maya wasn't laughing. She wasn't gloating. She stood there, calm and composed, her eyes still locked on Jessica. She didn't need to say a word. Her actions had spoken louder than any insult ever could. Jessica's crew looked at one another, suddenly unsure. For years, they had followed her lead, confident that no one would ever push back. But this new girl, this quiet girl in a red hoodie, had just taken down their strongest member without breaking a sweat. Jessica's face burned red. She clenched her fists, her pride screaming louder than the voices around her. This wasn't just about Maya anymore. This was about Jessica's reputation, her image, the control she had built over the entire school. Her voice cracked with rage as she shouted, "You think that makes you tough? You're nothing, you hear me? Nothing." But the truth was, her words sounded weaker now. The crowd had seen something she couldn't erase. They had seen Jessica stumble. They had seen her friend fall. They had seen Maya stand tall without fear. Maya, for her part, kept her arms folded, her expression calm. She hadn't hurt anyone badly. She hadn't gone too far. But she had shown enough to make one thing very clear. She wasn't someone to push around. And for the first time since she had arrived at the school, Maya wasn't just a quiet new girl in a red hoodie. She was something else entirely. Something that made even the bullies hesitate. The courtyard exploded with noise. "Yo! Did you see that?" She dropped him like nothing. "No way, what just happened?" Students shouted over each other, their excitement bubbling like a volcano. Phones were raised higher, fingers tapping screens, recording every second. Maya, the quiet new girl, had just flipped the script, and no one could believe what they were seeing. Jessica's face flushed crimson. It wasn't just anger, it was humiliation. She, the self-proclaimed queen of the school, the girl no one dared to cross, had just been shoved aside like she was nothing. And worse. Everyone had seen it. Her chest heaved, her jaw clenched, and without thinking, she lunged at Maya. She swung wildly, her fists cutting through the air with reckless force. The crowd gasped, some stepping back, others leaning in closer, eager not to miss a second. But Maya wasn't just standing there waiting to be hit. What nobody at the school knew, what nobody could have guessed, was that Maya had been practicing martial arts since she was a child. Her father had been a coach, her weekends spent sparring in gyms, her evenings disciplined by hours of drills, footwork, and self-control. Fighting wasn't about anger for Maya. It was about discipline. It was about knowing when not to fight, and about being ready when you had no choice. Years of training flowed through her veins. Every lesson, every practice, every moment of sweat and focus, it was all right there, in her blood. So when Jessica came at her swinging, Maya didn't panic. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look surprised. She simply moved. With precise timing, Maya sidestepped, her red hoodie sweeping past Jessica's fist. She lifted her arm just enough to block the swing and redirected it away from her body. Jessica stumbled forward slightly, her own momentum betraying her balance. The crowd roared. She dodged it. Did you see that? Jessica snarled, furious. She swung again, harder, faster, but every time Maya was there, blocking, redirecting, dodging. Her movements were fluid, like water bending around a rock. She didn't need to hit back. She didn't need to use strength. She let Jessica's anger do all the work for her. The angrier Jessica became, the calmer Maya grew. It was almost poetic. Jessica's punches grew sloppier. Her breath came out in sharp bursts. Her ponytail whipped behind her as she swung again and again, but nothing landed. Maya's eyes stayed sharp, focused, her body relaxed. She wasn't fighting to win a crowd. She wasn't fighting to humiliate Jessica. She was fighting to defend herself, and that calmness radiated with every move. Finally, Jessica tried one last desperate lunge. She threw her entire weight into it, convinced that this time she would finally connect. But Maya saw it coming before it even began. She shifted her foot lightly, stepping just out of range. Then, with one controlled movement, she hooked her leg behind Jessica's. She didn't push. She didn't slam her down. She simply let Jessica's own momentum do the work. Jessica's eyes went wide as her balance disappeared. She stumbled forward, arms flailing, before crashing on the ground with a heavy thud. And just like that, silence. The courtyard went still. For the first time all day, the noise vanished, replaced only by the sound of Jessica's ragged breathing as she lay on the floor. The so-called queen of the school, the girl who had ruled through fear and cruelty, was now staring up at the sky in shock. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the phones lowered slightly as students tried to process what had just happened. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't laugh. She didn't raise her hands in victory, like she had just won a championship fight. That wasn't her style. Instead, she stood there, calm as ever, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked down at Jessica, not with hatred, not with smugness, but with quiet strength. Her voice, soft but firm, carried across the silence. Next time, pick on someone who can't fight back. The words hit harder than any punch. The crowd erupted again, this time louder than ever before. Oh, she said that. She really said that. Students shouted, clapping their hands over their mouths in disbelief. Others looked at Maya with newfound respect, their eyes wide as though they were seeing her for the first time. Jessica's crew froze. None of them stepped forward. None of them tried to help their leader up. For the first time, they didn't look powerful. They looked small. Jessica scrambled to sit up, her face pale, her pride shattered. Her hands trembled as she tried to brush dirt off her jacket, but she could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on her. For years, she had been the one standing tall, while others shrank under her shadow. Now, in a single moment, the roles had reversed. Maya didn't press forward. She didn't take another step toward her. She didn't need to. The message was clear. The new girl in the red hoodie wasn't someone you could push around. She wasn't weak. She wasn't silent. She was strong, disciplined, and dangerous if you force her hand. And the scariest part of all, she had done it without breaking a sweat. The students who watched that fight would remember it for years. Not just because Jessica had fallen, but because Maya had shown something rare. Strength without cruelty, power without arrogance. The queen had been dethroned. And she had been dethroned not by another bully, not by someone who wanted power, but by someone who wanted nothing more than to be left alone. In that moment, Maya wasn't just a new girl anymore. She wasn't just the one in the red hoodie. She was something much more. From that day forward, everything changed. The school courtyard, once Jessica's stage, now carried a different story. Students who had once laughed at Maya, whispered about her hoodie, and treated her like an outsider, now looked at her with wide eyes and hushed voices. The red hoodie wasn't just a piece of clothing anymore. It was a symbol, a reminder of the day the queen of the school fell, and a new kind of strength rose in her place. The bullies who once sneered when Maya walked by now kept their distance. They didn't bump her in the hallways. They didn't whisper insults behind her back. Even their mocking laughter died out. One look from Maya was enough to silence them. And the students who had watched that fight unfold, they saw something they hadn't seen before. It wasn't just a fight. It wasn't just about Jessica losing. It was about courage. It was about someone standing tall when it mattered most. Because in that moment, Maya hadn't just offended herself. She had shown the entire school that fear could be broken. Maya didn't become popular overnight, and she didn't care to. Popularity had never been her goal. She wasn't interested in sitting with the cheerleaders, hanging out with the varsity jackets, or climbing some invisible ladder of status. But what she earned was something far more valuable. Something that even Jessica couldn't buy with her influence. Respect. Respect from the loners sitting quietly on the sidelines. Respect from the kids who had once been bullied themselves. Respect from the classmates who now looked at her not as the new girl, but as someone unshakable, someone they could admire. And most importantly, Maya earned respect from herself. She hadn't wanted to fight. She had never gone looking for trouble. But when trouble came knocking, she answered in the only way she knew how. With calm, with control, and with discipline. Because strength isn't about throwing the hardest punch. It isn't about having the loudest voice or the biggest crowd behind you. Real strength is about discipline, about confidence, about knowing when to hold your ground, even when the whole world expects you to fall. And Maya had proven that strength in front of everyone. By the end of the week, the whispers in the hallways weren't about her hoodie anymore. They weren't about her being the new girl. They were about something else. They were about the girl who stood alone and stood strong. The girl who didn't flinch when the bullies came for her. The girl who turned silence into power. The girl who reminded everyone that sometimes courage doesn't come from being the loudest in the room. It comes from standing firm when the crowd is against you. As for Jessica and her crew, they learned a lesson they wouldn't forget. Jessica tried, at first, to pretend nothing had happened. She laughed louder than ever, tossed her hair, and walked through the hallways like she still ruled them. But the difference was clear. When she walked by, people didn't look at her with admiration anymore. They looked at her with doubt, with curiosity, with the memory of that day in the courtyard, still fresh in their minds. And deep down, Jessica knew the truth. No matter how hard she tried to reclaim her throne, she could never erase what had happened. She could never undo the image of her falling to ground while Maya stood tall above her. Her crew knew it too. They laughed less. They barked fewer insults. And though they still walked together in their green jackets, their confidence was cracked. Because once you see the strongest bully fall, you realize that fear isn't as powerful as it seems. One afternoon, a quiet kid with glasses, a boy who had often been the target of Jessica's jokes, walked up to Maya in the cafeteria. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Hey, thanks for what you did the other day." Maya looked at him, tilting her head. "I didn't do it for thanks," she said softly. "I know," he replied, his smile small but real. "That's why it meant something." Maya didn't respond, but she didn't need to. That moment, that small spark of connection, told her everything she needed to know. What she had done wasn't just about her. It had rippled outward. It had given others the courage to believe they didn't always have to be afraid. The days rolled into weeks, and life at school returned to its rhythm. But the rhythm had changed. There was a new beat, a new undercurrent. Jessica still had her friends. She still had her laughter. But she no longer had unquestioned control. People no longer bent their heads when she walked past. They no longer laughed along with her cruelty out of fear. And Maya, she stayed the same. Quiet, calm, steady. She didn't chase the spotlight because she didn't need it. Her presence alone was enough. Sometimes people would still whisper when she walked by, but the whispers were different now. That's her. That's the girl who stood up to Jessica. She's the one who dropped her crew without even trying. She's not like anyone else. And Maya would keep walking, her red hoodie bright against a sea of green jackets, her steps steady, her head held high, because the truth was simple. Bullies had power only when people gave it to them. Fear was only strong when you let it grow. And sometimes the person you underestimate the most, the quiet one, the different one, the one standing alone, is the very person you should fear the most.